Happy Canada Day, everyone. I'm Carolyn Cameron, and to use Chris Johnston's words from Sportsnet.ca, there is some symmetry today as two Canadian cities are likely to be the hubs for the Stanley Cup playoffs when they do resume. And I do say likely, Chris, because as we've seen throughout this process, and not just in hockey, it has been COVID that has been dictating, well, all the news and also the destinations. Why Canadian cities?
Well, I mean, really, I think it's the COVID that led them here too. In addition to this, I mean, the league's, hope from the very outset of when the season was paused back in March was to have one Canadian city and one U.S.-based city for the hubs, and they've seen that plan be changed on them by the way things have spread, particularly in the United States. And so, in the last week here alone, we saw a potential, Vancouver hub. Undone by the fact there couldn't be an agreement reached with the BC health officials about how things would work inside the bubble if there was a positive test. Vegas was then hoped to be a hub for the NHL for a long, long time, and there's been a huge surge in cases in that part of the world. Some hotels have had to take some pretty extreme measures there, and so that sort of disintegrated on them. And, Edmonton had been hanging around really all along as a place where we haven't seen much spread of the disease. They're able to create a pretty good hub right around the arena area there in the ice district in Edmonton, and Toronto being the lone eastern place that's been left as also was viewed as a pretty good bid. So I think it's sort of just been a journey that's led them to this spot. And as you say, this is where it looks like it's going to land, but we can't pronounce it 100% done, signed, sealed, certified until all those agreements are reached.
So Edmonton and Toronto, that's where we're looking. As mentioned, the Ice District is where the 50 personnel for each team would be in the West in Edmonton. Eastern teams would be in Toronto, 50 personnel per team. Just because Edmonton and Toronto will be playing in their own cities, though, they still need to be part of these bubbles. There won't really be such thing as home ice advantage, will there?
I wouldn't think so. And look, there's been some debate about this. I know at various points when the league was considering earlier iterations of hub cities, there was talk about flip-flopping the Eastern and Western teams. Based on the plan that's being discussed right now, the East will stay in the East, so the Maple Leafs would play here in Toronto. The Edmonton Oilers would be based out of Edmonton. And I think, really what it comes down to is you have no fans in the building. All the players and staff for those organizations would have to move from their homes inside the bubble to the secure location where the hotel is, just like every other team taking part. And I imagine, and this hasn't been confirmed to me, there's times that they'll be playing where they're on the visiting bench in their own arena. I mean, it's not even the exact same circumstances they would face in typical times. And so given the unique atmosphere here, I think this makes the most sense. It also makes sense for just a scheduling standpoint to have the East based in an Eastern time zone, to have the Western teams based in the Mountain time zone. And so I don't think that those concerns are too paramount. And frankly, given everything else that the league is juggling, I just think that this makes the most sense with the circumstances here they have at hand.
If players aren't comfortable to return for whatever that reason may be, they do have the choice to opt out, don't they?
Yeah, no one's going to be made to do this. And just like we've seen, with Major League Baseball players and some of the NBA players, if for family reasons, health reasons, whatever other personal reasons you may have, there's going to be an option as part of the language that's been negotiated between the league and the Players Association for players to opt out of this restart. And based on the fact we've seen players do it in other sports, I have to imagine you're likely to see at least some NHL players do the same here. And I think this is essential to making it work. I don't think that the league wants to be in a position where anyone is being forced, to do something they're not comfortable with or that maybe doesn't work for their family situations, because these still are pretty unusual times. This is something we haven't encountered before in the past. And, that's an important part of the language that's been discussed here between the league and the union.
And that's also been the CBA negotiations that have been discussed. And to quote you from your article on sportsnet.ca, you said they're built around spreading the economic plan until more prosperous days return. How are they doing that?
Well, this is the one part of the deal that isn't done yet. And so I have to be very careful with the way this is discussed, because at any moment, what we say could change. But, in general, the framework of the CBA is actually what I would term a silver lining in these difficult times, because very early on when the pandemic hit, I think the union and the league really understood that they weren't against each other in this negotiation and figuring a way forward. It was about finding ways to find shared solutions to their shared problem, which of course is the fact that the industry is taking a massive economic hit during this time when games may not be played at all, but even if they are played, won't be played with fans generating the normal revenue that you would expect. And so, the way the framework of the CBA that's been discussed, as I understand it, has been built is that, that there is some of that shared pain. Players will have their escrow capped at 20% next season, which is the amount taken off their contracts they've negotiated. And for the next 2 seasons, actually, in exchange, the salary cap will be set at $81.5 million, which is where it was this year for the next 2 years. And essentially, that's a different kind of system than what the NHL's operated on. Eventually, over time, the owners will be paid back any extra money that's owed to them because, remember, in the league, the owners and the players split money 50-50. But during this period, I think that there was a recognition the players can't take the brunt of the fact that all of a sudden revenue is dried up. And so, that's an important part of how this works. Within those negotiations, you have some other things like new limits being placed on contracts for things like signing bonus amounts. I think that's still being negotiated, what it exactly will look like. From the players' end of things, it does sound as though the league is willing to send them back not only to the Olympics in 2022, but 2026. And so as they work through these details, again, not everything is being done. You're starting to see that, rather than fighting each other, I think they're finding ways to get from difficult financial times right now to better times, they hope, in the next few years. And to, in doing so, maybe correct some things that each side wanted in the previous CBA.
So now all that's left, once negotiations are finished for the CBA, players then have to vote to ratify that and the return to play plan. When do you think those two things could finally be finished?
Well, I would think by the end of the week, we're going to see that vote start. And what needs to happen once everything's finished, and as of Wednesday afternoon when we're recording this, it isn't all done. The players do need some time to be able to talk things over with the NHLPA, get clarification or feedback on why certain things were done. And then that voting process starts. That will take another couple days. So we're potentially looking at a week total, give or take a day or two, to complete everything. And it's going to be a full membership vote. Every NHL player will have his ability to cast a ballot. It needs 50% plus one to pass, to move forward. And I do think it's going to be an interesting vote. I mean, there's certainly some unrest out there. I don't think we can say, 100% of players feel anything to do with this. It's a very complex set of negotiations that have gone on. And so that will be an interesting vote. And it's needed ultimately before we know 100% that the league is going to proceed with training camps starting in a couple weeks, before we know for sure that the games will even be attempted in Toronto and Edmonton. And so this is a very crucial moment, but it sounds as though we're very close to having the negotiations done, and then we'll see what the players decide.
Even when there's not free agency on Canada Day, there's still work to be done in the NHL. CJ, I appreciate the time.
Good news is this beats working for a living, so we don't
It's true. Happy Canada Day.
Same to you.